It is Queensland. Speaking of Queensland, we'll catch up with Campbell Newman. There was plenty of nuggets out of the Senate estimates this week, which I love. It's much better than question time. The government apparently, or at least Treasury, has given advice to government that, well, they may not attack people who have superannuation balances above $3 million with a higher tax. Treasury actively looked at it. That was admitted by an official in Senate estimates this week. Let's go to Queensland now, here to help us understand all of these things a little better. Friday regular, former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman. Can you explain bobcatter, pigs and rugby league players and rifles?
No, but it takes me back to something that happened years ago when I was in the army, where one of the infantry battalions at Enoggera in Brisbane had soldiers go out shooting feral cats, and they thought this would be a great idea because these cats are huge. But I tell you what, there was quite the unintended media backlash against soldiers shooting poor old Moggy with high-powered rifles. So I'm just remembering that from about 30 years ago, mate.
I could understand it if it was soldiers, but I couldn't quite get the connection between he wants the Brisbane Broncos, who of course won the NRL, to spend their off-season, instead of going to Las Vegas and playing blackjack, they've got to go and kill pigs with rifles. I mean, I don't know where it comes from.
I take Las Vegas,
you know, the
I'm
cat,
sure.
You know the cat is better than me. The superannuation changes. Now, it's 2 years they've tried to legislate this. They can't get it through the Senate. This is the $3 million cap. Anything above $3 million, the tax will go from 15 to 30%. But the controversial part about that, Campbell, of course, is unrealised profits, which means that, you know, you might have a good year on the share market and you've got to pay this tax. But if you have a bad year, you can't claim back your losses. It seems, from my distance, that Albo's backing off this while Chalmers wants to push on ahead.
That's what it looks like, and good on the Prime Minister if he has asked for another look, another dive into this one, because it's poorly conceived, it's unfair, and I only think it's because of the work of many people who would have the ear of the Prime Minister, and indeed financial advisors and senior members of the accounting profession in this country and the tax profession, who pointed out that it is poorly conceived and it is unfair, and it sets up a double standard in terms of the way we treat tax, and it upends principles of tax law. So I do hope they make some changes. If higher tax is required on people with higher super balances, that's another thing. But we shouldn't be taxing unrealised gains in this country. It's quite a retrograde move.
Campbell, you and I have sat through some moments of history in our time because we're old enough to have been around a while. But that day, the day before yesterday, the historic peace deal signed, in the Middle East. You've got Donald Trump sitting there conducting a media conference. Marco Rubio walks in and hands him a slip of paper, then whispers in his ear, and Trump says, looks like we're close to a deal in the Middle East. They might need me to leave the room pretty quickly. But we're holding our breath. We've got our fingers crossed that it's all going to happen. We don't want to see innocent people killed. But on the same day, the Supreme Court in New South Wales has blocked protesters from rallying on the steps of the Opera House, as they should. But still, these protesters, both in Sydney and Melbourne, I'm not sure about Brisbane, continue to want to protest. I mean, shouldn't they be now marching with signs, thank God for peace, or something like that, instead of continuing on with this stuff they've been going on with for 2 years?
They should, Steve, but what people need to realise is that the organisers in both Sydney and Melbourne, and I'm not going to name names, of course, but you only have to do a bit of research to see who the people are, and they are extreme left-wingers, Socialist Alliance, and, the people who author pieces for Red Flag, who are against, the capitalist system, and individuals who've been against Israel for 20 years, so really that's their objective. It's actually more about anti-Israel than promoting truly, self-determination for Palestinian people living in coexistence peacefully with the Israeli state. So you have to understand who these people are. They are ultra left-wingers, and when this cause has gone away, ultimately, there'll be another one they'll be pursuing, and they'll be back as Extinction Rebellion or something like that.
Yeah, well, I was just about to say that. They'll go back to gluing themselves to the road so that people can't get to work. I want to come up to your patch. I started with this tonight. News that coal is going to be a major energy provider in Queensland right up until at least 2046. That's 20 years. The Treasurer in Queensland today made that announcement. I mean, Queensland obviously has the most modern coal-fired power stations in the country. Here was, I think it was the Energy Minister, not the Treasurer, making that announcement. Have a listen.
Without enough replacement generation and firming capacity, coal assets continue to be needed for affordable and reliable energy. That's reality. And that's not just for our state. Queensland is a consistent net exporter of electricity, and our state-owned coal assets are critical to the whole national electricity market.
Good on David Janetsky and I presume David Crisafulli as well. They're speaking sense, aren't they?
Look, good to see that from the Queensland Government and the Treasurer, David Janetsky, making an announcement. And look, they're dead right. It is absolute common sense. It is practical. It's needed for both the electricity supply and security and stability for Queenslanders, and the important role in pumping electricity south into the national grid. So good on them. And, you know, what we had in place before was, you know, a plan which really was a fantasy, because it wasn't, you know, it wasn't properly developed. It wasn't rooted in common sense. And by the way, it actually meant the destruction of natural areas in Queensland. You know, we were talking to the chap before, the farmer before, about the destruction of farmland. Well, that's happening in Queensland, and it's also happening in natural areas. And you know, to just continue to see the sort of the uncontrolled rollout of wind farms, for example, on the Great Dividing Range, destroying large slabs of, you know, important habitat, just puts the, you know, the whole quest for net zero into real perspective. We're destroying the environment to cut carbon emissions. Just ridiculous. And the Queensland Conservation Council, by the way, you know, they should hang their heads in shame, Steve, because, you know, they've come out, of course, against this announcement today by the government. I wish they'd stand up for, you know, for you know, cuddly animals who they're meant to be protecting in, you know, the large swathes of bushland which are being cleared for wind farms and solar.
Yeah, hopefully they'll wake up one day. Good to be back with you on a Friday night, Campbell. Thank you, mate.